Okay, great. So let me really quick start this off. Okay, so I just really quick wanted to record this. It will give me an opportunity to get my thoughts together and give me an opportunity because now I unfortunately have to work on Tuesday um, to really like give you guys an idea of what my project is here for assessment. Bring my notes up real quick. As seen by the style of it, right? We're talking about learning styles effect on pitch design, right? And so basically taking the common ideas of learning styles and trying to flip that into, what does that mean towards this process, which is very, very dependent on like coaching and so on and so forth, known as pitch design. It's very, baseball oriented for sure. But yeah, so we'll start off with talking about what learning styles are, right? Uh, so VAC assessment is looking into three different learning styles, right? Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Um, and so those three were the ones that we learned with the VAC assessment. I basically got one off the internet, kind of changed the wording on it and threw it on a Google form just so that it gave an opportunity for people to really understand. Because some of the language was like really, really old. I didn't really understand it. But yeah, so they're looking to kind of siphon people into one of these threes or even a combination of learning styles to hopefully hit them with the same sort of stimulus that will maybe be able to allow them to learn better, which is great. And so when learning into learning styles or when looking into learning styles, you quickly figure out a few things, right? And those stipulations are on the left. Those being that students will not be one specific type of learner all the time, meaning like what we just talked about. You can be a kinesthetic visual learner. You can, probably answer the same amount of questions that point towards you looking like both of those. So as the second point says, you could be a mix of multiple of these. And so the whole reason I wanted to do this was I read an article that talked about, excuse me, talked about learning styles and seeing where in this pitch design process this could be advantageous to help people kind of pick up on some of the changes, if I can speak English, that we would throw together, right? So someone with an auditory learning style has a preference for the transfer of information through listening. A visual learner has a preference for seeing or observe things. And kinesthetic learning style has a preference for physical experience, touching, and feeling. Yeah, so I don't think that there's technically a right or wrong learning style. The point is that there are types of learning that are right for your own personal learning style. So that's what I tried to do. This was very much so a summative approach, right? I was looking at the whole entire fall and spring of the past year when I was working with Bloomsbury University, and then trying to see, well, did I do a good enough job? Is there anything that I could do better? That kind of thing. So one of the big things that I think, especially when it comes to me kind of explaining it to CSA people and my fellow comrades in the CSA department, is just like this idea of pitch design, right? It's an idea that's like really near and dear to my heart. I really enjoy this idea of pitch design. And it's effectively kind of using like ball flight physics and getting information on ball flight physics and kind of figuring out via some, things on the internet and the way some professionals are talking about it, like what's good, what's bad, what produces better results and what doesn't produce better results, right? So I looked for a clean cut, example of what pitch design was or a definition. And it said that using feedback to make a minor adjustments to the way a pitcher throws a specific pitch or arsenal. And pitch design usually refers to this idea of like changing the grip on a pitch, changing maybe a pitch type, like a thought process of what you think that pitch type is. Might even include the way pitches play together, such as tunneling, right? And tunneling is this term that is effectively thinking about pitching as not just one pitch in time. It's thinking about, okay, well, how does that pitch look a lot like another pitch in your arsenal, and how are you able to then throw those pitches back to back to hopefully fool a batter to make sure that you can actually get the best results as a pitcher as possible. And then lastly, it's just talking about making some small adjustments to how the ball may come out of your hand. And so we use a lot of things, one of them being specifically like external cues. So saying, hey, I want you to think like you're throwing this pitch like a football, right? And so, and we'll get into that. I put these cues and these different tactics that I used in all three of these learning styles, buckets, and tried to see if I was using those with the correct players. So the terms to know, right, are MPH, which is miles per hour. Pretty easy. You can see that on the pitch number one. If you can see my cursor, I think you guys can. So, and on the cursor, it says MPH, right, 90.3. That's just how hard. 92 is the pitch coming in a velocity, in a velocity continuum. Then it's RPMs, which is revolutions per minute. Other people like to call it spin rate, right? And so that's just how much is that pitch spinning while it's going towards home plate. Now it's not actually spinning 2,287 times before it, is caught by the catcher. It's actually more so an algorithm of it's probably having 13 revolutions. So of course, what does that look like in a minute? It probably, equivalates to around 2,200. Then we're talking about access. So, right. So you see it here with the 38-minute access and the 1 hour and 18-minute access. And so that is effectively, if you think about like a clock, right? 12 being north and 6 being south, and then east-west, east being 3 o'clock and west being 9 o'clock. So the way that they like to talk about how that pitch is spinning is by using it on a clock, right? So as you can see, pitch one, which I believe is the one on the left, when it comes back towards the pitcher's mound here, we can really tell. Yeah, the blue one with the blue stream, the line. So the one on the left is sitting at like a 38-minute access, so 12:38. And the one in the green is probably a little bit more towards 118. Then we are talking about efficiency, right? And efficiency is talking about how much of that spin, so that 22,870 RPMs that we were talking about earlier, how much of that is actually contributing towards movement on the pitch. There are pitch-specific pitch types that are supposed to be a lot more efficient, therefore giving us more movement. Efficiency is just telling us, are we using the spin enough to hopefully turn out a lot of movement. Sorry, I had to turn up the light on that screen. So again, some pitches are good with higher efficiency, some are bad. There's really no right or wrong way. There are some studies that I will get into in the paper, but of course I didn't want to bore everyone on this about it, that talk about which pitches are really better with higher efficiency. And then the last 2 points is HB and VB, right? And that's horizontal break and vertical break. Pretty simple, right? How much is that pitch moving? They say in a gravity-less continuum, like how many inches is it moving horizontally versus vertically? As you can see, there's a XY axis on the strike zone. And so like it's moving the pitch one with the blue trail. You can see my cursor that has 19 inches of vertical break, meaning that it is not falling to gravity. It's doing a really good job of resisting gravity. And then 6.7, which is just saying that it's probably moving 6 inches horizontally. And then you can see the difference in between the pitches. I produced these Driveline Edge via a company called Driveline to kind of give guys an idea of what they look like. All this data comes from this little box, which we will talk about here later. It's called a Rapsodo, and it's effectively a camera-based system that has algorithms on the computer aspect of it, and it kicks back to an iPad and tells you, hey, this is what all these metrics that we're talking about look like. And excuse me. And so that's a big tool that we've been using. I really enjoy that tool myself. Okay, enough about me geeking out about baseball, even though that's going to continue throughout this PowerPoint. But so when it comes to me and it comes to what I am trying to assess here, there's a common idea around humans usually being visual learners. So I found the statistic that 65% of humans are considered visual learners, right? And so if we were to take this at face value, and let's say we're all just teaching a first grade class, hypothetically, then if you know that 65% of humans are considered visual learners, then you probably would tailor what you were doing more towards visual learners, you would think. But then what I quickly figured out is, like, of course, that's not the case. I think that it's way too simplistic of a view to just be like, hey, 65% of humans are considered visual learners. Therefore, that means that the class that I currently have they probably also fall in that range. Of course, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So, my question quickly became, is that truly the case for your group of students? Meaning, for me, it was my pitchers that I work with. So it was, okay, well, I'm going to have to test this, figure out where they are, and, see if they fall into, easy buckets, meaning like they're kinesthetic learners, they're visual learners, they're auditory learners, or if they're a little bit more like in the middle, like maybe they're all three. I had one that was really close to all three. And then lastly, I just wanted to see, is providing stimulus, aka this pitch design process that matches one style, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, advantageous to the process or to the student's learning process when it comes to athletics. So those were kind of just the idea of like, what was I assessing, what was I going after. So yeah. And then here we go. We got the relevant mission and department, right? This was a part of, I think, our second or third portion of the slide, of not the slide, the pre part of doing this for Dr. Andino. And so my relevant mission and department, right, was Bloomsburg University, which I mean, I think a lot of us are running into this and know what the mission is, since we're doing a lot of studies. So I will skip that just for, to cut down the time that we're going on about this. Same thing with student affairs. We all kind of have a really good idea of what the student affairs mission was. But I think where I differentiate in my study here is, of course, I'm looking into the Department of Athletics, and I'm specifically looking into the baseball program. So I think when it comes to athletics, and this is what the athletics department has kicked out, saying what their mission is. They say, Bloomsburg University Department of Intercollegiate Athletics, in partnership with the Student Affairs Division, provides a sustainable, successful athletic and academic experience for students in adherence to all conference rules and NCAA rules as well. Husky Athletics is committed with an internal focus to creating a positive environment for coaches and student athletes to give them an advantage and opportunity to excel athletically, academically, and socially. BU will also provide equitable programs that develop leadership, compete for championships, provide community service, and ensure sportsmanlike conduct. Externally, the focus of building relationships while creating a sense of pride, fostering strong relationships, developing integrity, and reaching fiscal and fundraising goals encourages student athletes to reach their full potential as leaders. So that's the athletics. So then when it came to baseball, I kind of cut it down to, when I'm talking with the head coach, Mike Collins, who's my GA supervisor, I'd say that my three biggest takeaways when talking to him about the program that he's been a part of for, I think it's like 15 years at this point. So he's been around for a while, and he's developed and changed these goals and this mission. His mission usually comes down to, A, he wants to be able to teach values that can help students grow in the classroom and off the field. He also wants to prepare athletes for their postgraduate endeavors / job search. And 3 is he wants to aid in the process of continual growth and holistic development. So I think I was really impressed when I came. Like, this was nothing that I helped with. It's just kind of the culture that I inherited when I came here, which was like really, really focused on, look, like the next 4 years are great, but the next 40 years are really more important. You getting a job, moving off into the field, being a good husband, being a good father. So I think that we try to do our best and provide a lot of opportunities for people to learn outside of the classroom. We're just not focused on the athletics part of it. There's a hell of a lot more to this whole entire program than just simply winning baseball games and developing. But when it does come to baseball, I think it really comes down to, we need to aid the process of growth and development. I said holistic development, right? And I talked a little bit about that when I'm talking off the field. This specific PowerPoint and my study is a little bit more looking at, athletically what they're doing, movements, physics, that kind of thing. So I think I do a really good job. And I know we had it in our final here of, like matching data plus just some more like feeling based things to measure, quantitative versus qualitative. I forgot those, but I think I do a great job in this study specifically, kind of mashing those two up and really giving people a good idea of what that could look for us. So the student learning outcomes, and there I am, there I am with my guys in our, I think we played 10 games, which was unfortunate, but whatever. So the student learning outcomes that I kind of came up with is I think that coaches will learn the importance or lack thereof of taking learning styles into account when teaching student athletes new movements or techniques. And then I think it's also important to know that the other learning outcome was students will learn how learning styles aid their own understanding of a movement and or a technique. So yeah, those were the two I came up with. So now we're getting really, really nitty gritty. And this is actually like a part I really, really love. So these were the quantitative and the qualitative methods I was kind of pulling out when it came to data. So when it came to the VAC assessment was 29 questions that I threw onto a Google forum because I thought that would be the easiest way to, be able to export the data and so on and so forth. So I took the questions and I threw them into a Google forum. And the VAC learning style model suggests that most people can be divided into one of three preferred styles of learning. And people commonly have a main preferred learning style, but this will be part of a blend of all three, which was kind of like what we talked about. I actually found a majority, I'm trying to think back. I think, a majority of the learners that I had were some sort of combination of two or three different learning styles. I will say that they definitely they brought some interesting thoughts to my head when I was like, oh, well, this kid's a visual learner, or this student is a kinesthetic learner, and thinking back to things that really worked for them. So off of the VAC assessment, we got, an idea of, okay, well, this is what their best or their preferred learning style is. Great. And so then what do I do when it comes to a pitch design process to hopefully hit them with that learning style so that they can kind of move forward and have a really good idea of what I was looking for with them. So when it came to, testing the pitch characteristics, I kind of did like a test retest system of, okay, well, they came in the fall, test them and get a baseline of what's going on with when it comes to the ball flight metrics. As you can see with this bottom picture, again, I think you can see my cursor, this bottom GIF, produce these slow motion videos of what the data was saying and what that data would look like. So we used Rapsodo right here. This is that camera / computer that kicks back all that data on an iPad. So we were using that for that retest method. And so then I kind of categorized what I like to call the bag of tools that we were kind of going after with each guy into that visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning bucket. So when it came to visual learners, hypothetically, in the best environment, showing them Rapsodo information and being able to explain it was probably advantageous. But I think the most advantageous, and I did it for everyone, but because I think it's good for me as well, just to be able to learn that too, was the visual slow motion videos that you're seeing right there. So effectively taking a camera, getting right up on their release points, and being able to see actually what that ball looks like when it's coming out of their hands, which maybe 2 or 3 years ago for me was never a thought. And then the more and more I kind of read and learned, the more and more I was like, oh man, this is some serious stuff. So that's what we would cover for visual learners. When it came to auditory, the use of external cues, right? So we talked about those, I think, a couple slides ago, about effectively cueing athletes, saying, okay, well, I want you to feel like you're throwing a football here, or I want you to feel like you're throwing a changeup or pronate through this pitch so that you can get a better efficiency on that. I cued those. That I would say that to the athlete, tell them to think about that while they were throwing the pitch and see how that kind of went off from there. And then the kinesthetic learners, which I think I could have done a better job because I didn't know about some of this stuff, like the clean fuego, which is actually up here, which is like a baseball that's split in half. That's supposed to help with spin efficiency. I've actually used it a little bit during this quarantine period when I have been away from the students, kind of just bored and trying to pass time myself. I do think it helps with focusing on spin efficiency, but unfortunately we did not get to use that as much. We used more of the video right next to it, the slow motion video of me kind of holding a baseball that has Sharpie all over it. So we called that a spin access ball, which is effectively kind of giving us, again, a really good idea of feedback on what that what those lines look like when you throw it in catch play. And then the new one has been a curveball ball, which I forgot to kind of throw up here. But it's effectively two baseballs glued together, again, focusing on spin efficiency and trying to make breaking balls more efficient. And then lastly, changing grip, right, which is probably the most simplistic and the one that we did the most, which was a player would come, show us the grip, and we would say, okay, well, let's see what that looks like. He'd throw a pitch. We would be unhappy with the results that was turning out, and we would ask to probably tweak after a couple of bullpens and opportunities for them to throw just to see if it's an outlier. Then we would kind of ask them to make a change on a grip and see what it looked like. So those were probably the three big pools that we're going after there. Next, right, so we got the results for the VAC assessment. So just got back to these. So I did all the guys who were coming back from last year to this year. And then I did the new guys, but I didn't keep the new guys because we didn't really work them through this pitch design process. But so then the group of students that were here was 13 students, and students that were within 2 points of a different learning style were considered a combination of both or all three. So as you can see, I held it to two. So like, for example, if you look at JS, which, I mean, if you really want to look up their names, go wild with it. But their name and then what their score was. And then I kind of decided, okay, well, for example, JS is 17 and 15. They're 2 points away. So he's technically a visual and a kinesthetic learner. Maybe that's something that you would change, but who knows? But the end results are showing that we had 2 visual learners. So that was 15% of the group. And then auditory learners, we didn't have any on our team, which I thought was really interesting. And then kinesthetic learners, we had 7, which was about 54% of the group. And then a combination of visual and kinesthetic learners, that was 4 of them, 31% of our group. So altogether, we had like way over half had some sort of proclivity to go towards a kinesthetic learning style, which was interesting because, like we said before, more than half on other things, like on the internet, if you were to look up learning styles and talk about learning styles, would point towards people mostly being visual learners. And yeah, we didn't find that here, which was interesting, right? So what was my biggest takeaway? 85% of student athletes were at least partially kinesthetic, right? And I think that there's a connection that can be made there, right? Like, for the most part, these guys aren't, like professional athletes, right? They're here in the NCAA, so they're amateur athletes, but they do have, a proclivity to be athletic, use physical cues, and kind of use that. So maybe in a way, that's something that I should have known coming in, that maybe they would have, that proclivity to be more of a kinesthetic learner than, anything else. So maybe it isn't just a one-on-one connection for me to debunking the fact that 65% of humans are visual learners. But I think that's really interesting, and that needs to be taken into account for. So, and then what I did is, as seen, I really enjoy Excel spreadsheets, maybe a little too much, but that's okay. So pitch design results, right? So what I did is I put each player on the left, then I went preferred learning style that you just saw on the other one. The pitch design issue that we saw after them throwing on this piece of technology known as the Rapsodo. And so we had stuff like refining off speed, meaning that the off speed pitch was either inefficient or wasn't breaking enough, or really just wasn't a good pitch off of that feedback. Cutting fastball, meaning that they weren't really properly using spin efficiency to get as much movement from their fastball as possible. And then even a combination of two, I think the last one was the consistency, right? It was just kind of like, hey, we need to be more consistent with maybe the command over the pitch or something like that. But yeah, so then I backed it up with the stimulus that we used to, try to hit that issue. And by the way, I take no credit for this. Like, all the guys really bought into what was going on, really enjoyed how much feedback they were getting on the process. And so we were simply me and my two, my assistant and my manager who work with me in the pitchers. We would effectively give out changes and let them kind of figure out from there what they thought was going to work and what was not going to work. And then the stimulus, I kind of, as I said, I bucketed it, put it into a pool of which which learning style I thought that it would be, and then was it successful via the Rapsodo, which here I won't show as much because it's pretty granular, but were they able to kind of alleviate the issue that we were going after? So, were they, when we said they were cutting their fastball, were they able to throw it more efficiently? Great. And then did I match the learning style? Yes or no? Okay. And so I came out of it with like a few questions, right? The number one, whatever. But the first question was, did I do a great job of matching learning styles? And I wrote down in my notes, maybe. So I got 9 out of 13, and that's about 69%. So I don't know. I mean, I wasn't cognizant of learning styles at that moment in time, and we'll talk about this here in the next slide. But like, learning styles are even a little bit outdated of a thought process, if we're being completely honest. But so did I do a great job of it? No, it wasn't in the forefront of my mind. This was an after action review. But yeah, so 2, was the coach aware of the learning styles during this process? As I said, nope, I was totally blind. Was not thinking about that, just trying to do my best to have my knowledge, hopefully one piece of knowledge I threw their way worked and we saw a change. I thought that was going to be interesting. 3, was the coach the singular force that made these changes? As I said before, yeah, that's no. Yeah, I wasn't the only one. I think a lot of credit has to be given to the players and their willingness to actually make the change and move forward with that. I also think that our student manager and student assistant did a really great job as well and helped in that process. So yeah, no, I don't think, but I was by any stretch of the imagination the singular force in that one. So 4, was the coach successful? And I said some yes, some no. So some of these situations, like if I'm thinking back to my own memory, it's like the first one, NS, like refining off speed, was a grip change, and that was almost an immediate feedback, and that worked, but I did not match the learning style. But I'd say more times than not, it seems to work. I don't know. I hate to come out of this with a inconclusive, but I think that's the way we're going towards here. The 5th question I had was, would I change the way I would have coached each athlete? And I said, who knows? If I would have known this learning styles and matched it, could we have been more successful? Again, I don't think so. But that's only because I did more information or more deep diving, got more information after the fact when I decided to do this paper, maybe like how many months ago. But yeah. So the last question, are learning styles important when it comes to the pitch design process? And I think we're going to get into that here. I have some really good stuff that I had some help with from Dr. Andino about just talking about learning styles and how it's actually kind of an outdated thought process. And I think I'd even kind of back that up. Like, I don't think that it's necessarily like the biggest aspect when it comes to this whole entire thing. And then the little star at the bottom right, we retested characteristics on Rapsodo. And just to remind you all, like, those were the cues that we were using and where they were in the visual, auditory, kinesthetic learner buckets, right? And then debunking the learning styles myth, right? So it's very much outdated. So on the right, you see Beth Rogowski. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. But she works at Bloomsbury in the psychology department. And she actually has a really big paper, which I am kind of referencing here too, that talks about how this idea of learning styles is really, really outdated. It just isn't an effective educational technique. And so there's some other papers, which I will talk about in the paper, but I didn't talk about in this slide specifically, but like just talking about how students who are labeled as having a dominant learning style may then choose not to pursue subjects which they perceive as being dominated by a different learning style. So in a lot of cases, if students are aware of this, it might actually inhibit the way that they learn and their opportunities or their willingness to take opportunities that are seemingly outside of their learning style. Some other things were like, despite this, amongst educators, there appears to be a widespread belief that learning styles is an effective method. In a survey of UK school teachers, believes, though unsupported, that individuals learn better when they receive information in their preferred learning styles 93% of the time, which shows us that though it has been proven recently that learning styles is not helpful, at least, when it comes to these studies, then, why are people still believing in it? Which I think is maybe for a different class or a different discussion. Another study using faculty in higher education in the USA found similar results to that, which they had a 64% rating of yes to learning styles being advantageous. And then, depending on the institution, more than not usually believe in this idea, this myth of learning styles. So kind of threw a wrench in my plans, but I don't disagree. I think it's an interesting opportunity to see how in line some of those were, and some of those cues and opportunities to improve pitches were compared to guys' learning styles. So I just thought that was interesting. And then so just some conclusions I had. Learning styles aren't everything, right? We really honestly should probably be more weary of them than we should agree with them. And then when it comes to just being aware of learning styles, but don't get lost in them. I think that my biggest takeaway was that they weren't important, but they were interesting. And there may be a connection. And hell, who am I to say that everyone won't react better to something that's in their learning style. So again, inconclusive. But then lastly, provide learners different types of stimulus that cover the bandwidth of styles, right? And so that actually, I believe, came from Beth Rogalski, and her article with a few other professors talking about how, you can't be one singular learner. So if you're a visual learner, it doesn't mean that you're only intaking information visually. That could mean that you also do, to some degree, intake some information from a kinesthetic style or from an auditory style. So as teachers and coaches, I guess, offering them the bandwidth or multiple. So for me, it would be offering each athlete maybe one auditory, one kinesthetic, and one visual, stimulus to hopefully improve that pitch. Probably would have been the most advantageous in the end. So, that's probably another a big takeaway here. Yeah. And so we got the references here, and so I'll kick it over to future me to take questions. Yeah. So, all right. Thanks. Bye.